Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and welcome to the live stream today. We're going to talk about how to get hired. We're going to talk about how to answer all kinds of job interview questions and past job interviews. And we're going to be opening it up to questions. So welcome, and congratulations to Juan Carlos for joining up as a member. That's awesome. In housekeeping news, I will be doing a live stream on Friday, late night on Friday, actually early Saturday morning, which is the Beyond Employment live stream for those of you who are looking to escape the drudgery of corporate slavery and you want to earn an income on doing something other than working as an employee. That's what I talk about on the late night Friday chat. So join that, and it's members only to ask questions. Everybody can see it, but only members can ask questions on that chat. So welcome to Juan. And I almost forgot the word of the day. What is the word of the day? The word of the day is expatiate. To expatiate on something. That means to talk, to open up about, to give great detail. So remember that word. You're going to expatiate on something. You use that word among your business friends, and they will think you're the coolest person for like a week. I guarantee it. So there you go. And we're going to be opening up to questions, but I wanted to start with a scenario. Hello to Shaquille Oatmeal. I remember Shaquille Oatmeal. That kind of sticks in your head. It's great having a name with a bit of character because people will remember it. If you were called John Smith or something, you know, no one would. I could talk to you every week and I wouldn't remember that I talked to you before. But it's good to have a name with character. And Julia says, good morning, Bill. Good morning, Julia. It's great to see you here. Welcome. And I want to start with a scenario, and that is to imagine this, okay? Imagine you're in the shoes of a hiring manager and you've just interviewed a whole bunch of candidates for a job. And one candidate is the most qualified, okay? But a different candidate is the most likable. Which one would you pick? Which one do you think is most often picked? It's the one that's most likable. That's true, because if you're at the job interview, that usually means that you are qualified. They're not really concerned about your technical skills on paper. They've read your resume and you've passed the resume test. They invited you for a job interview. They still wanted to talk to you after scrutinizing your resume. So you're qualified. The purpose of the interview is to determine whether you're likable. They can work with you, okay? Whether you get along with them or not. And what we see is people end up picking the most likable candidate because they feel that, you know what, although another candidate might be more qualified, I think this person is the one we should go with because I think they're going to work out the best. Who do we got here in the chat? We got, and I apologize if I'm saying people's names wrong. I'm terrible with it, absolutely terrible with names. Garima says, hello from India. Hello, Garima. It's great to see you here. And Kumar says, hire for attitude and train for skills. Well, I agree with you about the hire for attitude. Yes. Listen, it's a well-known fact that many people are qualified for a particular job. Okay. There are exceptions to this, okay, but usually what we see in most situations is that you have more than one qualified candidate applying to a job. Sometimes you've got a lot more than one qualified candidate, right? And they have to select between them. And the thing that it's really about, that the whole selection process is about, it's about beyond your qualifications. It's about your personality, okay? Because as we know, you could be an absolute genius, but if nobody can work with you, it's never going to work out. There's no benefit of being a genius if you just can't work with people, okay? Or you can't work with those particular people. That's kind of what this is about, right? So it's all about personality. It's stupid, but it's true. This is very unintuitive, especially to a lot of young people that are kind of relatively new to this game. Job interviews are about your soft skill, your personality. They're not really about your technical skills. Oh, sure, they may ask you technical questions, but that's kind of just to have content to talk about, right? It's what they're really assessing you on is who you are as a person, your communication skills, how professional you are, how polite you are, whether you understand protocol. And it's mainly about not giving red flags, not saying inappropriate things, not acting inappropriately, not dressing inappropriately, all that kind of stuff, because those signal much more serious problems, okay? They might signal that you just don't get it, right? And it's not going to be a good fit. Everybody loves that word, right? So yes, that's what job interviews are about. Now, this is a Q&A. So if you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat. If you're watching this on the desktop, you should see the chat stream to the right of the video, and you should be able to type in a question or whatever. So I'm here to answer any questions you guys might have about hiring and employment and interviews and resumes and all that stuff. So yeah, fire away. Okay. Yes, Kumar says, Peter, if I'm saying that right, Piotr, hello from Poland. Hello, Peter. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce your name properly. I could try, but then I'd just be digging myself deeper into a hole. It's great to see you here. Thanks for coming. Julia says, I have an internal interview with a different department. Any advice on how to handle these internal interviews? I've never had an internal interview before where I know the hiring manager. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. It's slightly different than if you're, applying as a candidate cold, right? Because you already know the people. I mean, apart from the obvious stuff, okay, the interviews should be more relaxed. They should be more comfortable. Hopefully you won't get as nervous, okay, because you know at least the main person in the interview. There's really not that much different, okay? Remember, they're not assessing you on the job that you're in. They're assessing you on the job that you're applying for. So it can get a little, not confusing, but it can be hard to change gears because you're used to dealing with this interviewer as a boss or a coworker or an acquaintance at the workplace. Okay, you're used to having that relationship with them, where maybe they're the boss and you're in your current role, but they might be interviewing you for a promotion where you're going to be at the same level as the boss. Okay, I mean, whatever the situation is. Okay, in which case it's hard to sort of get out of your role as a subordinate or as an employee. Okay, so they're going to be looking for all the skills, both technical and soft skills, for the new role. So it's still going to be a performance. Okay, there's a lot of temptation to sort of keep it casual. You already know the person, you have a good relationship. And it's good to be warm and friendly and everything, but remember, this is an interview. You have to sort of treat it the same way as if you were applying for a job at another organization, right? So that's kind of what I'll say about that. Other than that, there's really not that much different. I mean, it's great to give examples. If you're called on to give examples to back up your answers, if they're looking for certain skills or accomplishments, it's great to favor your skills and accomplishment that you have with this current organization. Okay, I mean that's the other thing you want to do there because they can relate to it. Peter is okay, awesome, right on. Kumar says, "What differentiates leadership interviews to any other lower level hiring as a candidate?" Well, it depends. I mean, there's formal interviews where they do a sort of contrivance where they try and test your skills in the interview. It's really not. It's not directly possible to test someone's skills in an interview on whether they can lead people, because in the interview, you're the subordinate. You're the one being interviewed. You're not, influencing anybody, right? So they may ask questions about, what would you do if, or they ask you questions about, tell me about a time you were in the situation, you had to lead someone, what did you do? Things like that, right? They can ask you HR related questions, and I mean like questions with regard to how to manage people. For example, they could say, okay, scenario, imagine you're the boss and a subordinate, an employee comes to you and they have an issue. How would you deal with it? You have a subordinate that's insubordinate. How would you handle it? You have a situation where you have to deal with somebody, you give them instructions, you come back later expecting they would have done what you said, but you come back and they haven't done what you said. How would you handle it? Things like this, right? They can sort of try and assess your leadership skills that way, but it's not very good because it's not direct. They're not directly observing you in action, influencing people, managing people. Okay, so it's a bit of a contrivance, and a lot of times, it depends who the interviewer is, because you see, the thing is, it's like it's a problem you get like in executive recruitment, where they're hiring someone who's going to be a manager of managers or something like that. And you're talking to a recruiter. Now, how the hell would a recruiter know what skills or personality you need to do that? Because they themselves have never done it. They couldn't spot it when they see it. Usually they give those types of interviews to vice presidents and people like this who have actually managed managers. So then, they have a bit more of a frame of reference. So, these are some of the things in play. So if you're up for an interview where they're going to be testing supposedly your leadership skills, the only thing I would do, because you can't demonstrate it directly, is just come forearmed with several stories of how you managed people and some specific situations, like insubordination, like you had to lead a team, like you had to get consensus, I don't know if you've had to fire someone, like things like that. Come forearmed with some stories like that, so that if they ask you questions of that nature, you can answer and you can give an example from your experience to back it up. Other than that, that's pretty much all you can do specifically for that. Hopefully that helps. TQ, Total Quality, says, hello, Bill. In your opinion, how important are recommendations from a prior manager on your LinkedIn, and how long is too long to request one? That's a great question. Okay. Question the first. Okay. Until you answer me these questions 3. Question the first. You're asking how important are recommendations on LinkedIn? They don't hurt, but they're not supremely important, because the thing is, you do get a phenomena where, I don't know what you call it, but like one person says to another, I'll write you a recommendation if you write me a recommendation. You have that kind of arrangement going on. And a few years ago, that was a thing. People were talking all about that, and so you take the recommendations with a grain of salt. Okay. Now, that being said, if you have a bunch of recommendations from a bunch of different people, that does tend to look good. Okay. Especially if they say very nice things and they emphasize skills that you want other people to know you have. Okay. So that can be useful. What you can also do is you can sort of take excerpts from those recommendations. If somebody has like a really brilliant sentence or something that you're very proud of, you sort of take a few excerpts from those, and then you quote like the person, and you put those on a piece of paper or a document, and you can send that with your resume. Okay. Or you could put it as a tagline at the top of your resume, something like that. Okay. If it's from a previous boss and it's very complimentary, and it's very powerful, or you feel it's very powerful, you can put that almost like as a tagline under your name on your resume. Some people do stuff like that, and it can be pretty effective. So yeah, and how long is it too long to request one? I don't know. I would say 5 years for sure is too long, because people may not remember, after 5 years, but less than 5 years, it depends on how long you've worked there. If you worked at a place for 5 years and then you come 3 years later and say to your boss, can you write me a recommendation? I think that's reasonable if they were your boss for 5 years. But if you were only at a place for a month and you send a note like 2 years later and say, can you write me a recommendation? Obviously, that's too long. So it's going to vary, okay, by length of term and all this kind of stuff. Phil Blank says, do you foresee work from home opportunities possibly helping women balance family life with long-term high-level advancement? I'm not the person to comment on that. And it's also those kinds of questions, unfortunately, Phil, they tend to be very political, and I'm not going to insert myself into the middle of that kind of stuff. The answer is that it can, but not necessarily, and not for everyone. Okay, so beyond that, you can make your own reality. And the other thing is that, I get a lot of questions saying like in that format where people say, this thing doesn't mean that you have to do this, or does it have this implication? The thing is, the world is a very wide and varied place. It's a mosaic of all kinds of different cultures and opinions and personalities. And the people making decisions to hire or to do business with you, they are equally of, a variety of personalities and worldviews and opinions. And they come from organizations that have widely different cultures and different industries. So usually those type of questions, the answer is yes and no. Some places, yes, you do see that. Other places, you see the opposite of that. So what's the sort of blanket advice? It's, well, okay, if that's what you're seeing and it's a problem, look elsewhere, because other places, they don't do that. And there is opportunity for you to overcome that. For example, you could ask any question about prejudice. You could say, do people discriminate against someone like myself with a disability or something? And the answer is yes. In some places, they do. In other places, they don't. So the question comes in, should I persist or should I try and go for this job? And I would say, yeah, you could go for it, but some places will discriminate against you. They will not be into that. Other places, it will not be a problem at all. So if you apply to those places, it won't be a problem. A lot of things have that sort of general answer. How's that for the most non-committal yet long-winded thing I've probably ever said? I aim to please. And I've never been asked that before, so way to go. Julia says, very helpful, thank you. My pleasure, Julia. And it was a very smart question. Shami Kapoor says, I'm 55. Generic experience of multiple segments, okay? Trying to relocate from Mauritius, I think it's, to Canada on any office job. How to convince potential employers by my resume or interview to hire and give work visa. Well, once again, I'm not an immigration specialist, so when it comes to work visas, that's not really my core competency. However, okay, assuming that you're okay to come here, okay, that the immigration part is over, okay, you're trying to convince a potential employer to hire you. Okay, first of all, the easy stuff. The thing I've said in the past several times is a reference from an employer in Canada is very, very valuable. Okay. And what I've seen, first of all, what I've seen is that some companies, some organizations will hire freshly landed immigrants and some won't. Okay. Now, in the past, I've worked for one company in particular that made it their business to hire newly landed immigrants, like sort of very, very early. The trade-off is that they don't pay very much. This company I'm referring to didn't pay very much. And the reason for that is because a lot of times, if you're hiring an employee because they have skills, they have technical skills, they have some kind of qualification from their home country, it's very hard for the Canadian company to validate that qualification and be able to determine like what its equivalent would be in the host country, in this case, Canada. Okay, I've actually had to do that work. I was kind of where the rubber hit the road for that type of work. Okay, so that's a problem. Somebody shows you a qualification, and often it's in a language you don't understand, and you have no idea what it's supposed to be, and you try and do some research, but you can't get really solid data on what the equivalent would be in your host country. So what they do, certainly the company I worked for did, and I know other companies do this too, but a lot don't, is they'll say, okay, we'll give you a chance. We're not going to pay you very much because we're taking a risk. You know, you could really know your stuff or you could really not. We don't know, but we'll give you a chance. Okay. So some companies will do that. Okay. Some organizations will do that. Others won't. And the big thing, the big barrier is going to be twofold. It's going to be, number one, they need to see a host country based qualification. The other reason is that they need to see a reference from the host country. Like they want to see host country experience and like a reference, so they can call up your previous employer and get a personal reference. What they would like to hear is that, yes, this person is reliable, they're punctual, they're a hard worker, we haven't had problems with them, you know, they can follow instruction, they understand safety, they understand rules, and there's not really much of a culture shock that's a problem. That's what they want to hear. Okay. So some people, what they do is they arrive in the host country, they get like any job, like any sort of basic entry level job, just so they can get host country experience. And once they do that, it can be very valuable. That's your stepping stone to getting a job that's more appropriate for you with your skills. And it's because you have an employer as a reference that anyone could call up and say, you know, how was your experience with this employee? And they'll say, yeah, they were great, you know. Okay, so that's kind of the thing. So what that means is that you might not be able to get the immediate, like the job you're wanting, you might not be able to get that immediately the moment you land in the country, but you could get it within a relatively short period of time, but you might have to take a more basic job first just to get that reference. And that's the extent of my knowledge really on that. I'm not an immigration expert, but hopefully that helps. Hello from Norway. From Rudolph. Norway, that's Oslo, right? The capital of Norway is Oslo. Kumar. I don't know how to give a heart back. They do that thing now, don't they? Like they do this. I'm absolutely terrible at this, but that kind of thing, right? Some people can just, they're so coordinated. They can just go conk like that and it's perfect, right? I can't, you know, I'd have to do it in the mirror for, you know, like 2 minutes. Fatima says, being a leader, how to lead a team without spoon feeding them. Well, that's not a question I can answer in like 2 minutes. That's a big thing. Being a leader is someone who influences others. That's all it means, okay? And the military has been studying how to do this for about 5,000 years, like that's documented. Other people have been have been studying this, like the world of political science has been studying this. The world of psychology and sociology has been studying this, and the world of business has been studying this. And all I can say is beware of posts on social media, because it seems in business circles, everyone and their brother is writing a post on leadership. Whenever I log into LinkedIn, in my feed, there'll be all kinds of posts on leadership, and they're complete baloney. They're just misinformation. They're written by people who obviously don't understand what leadership is. They've never been trained on it, and it doesn't seem like they have done it themselves. And they'll give you some, almost like a parable, like a saying about ethics or something like that. Be a good person. That's a leader. It's like, what? No, it isn't. Not necessarily. When was the last time a military general followed that advice? It's a very complicated subject, okay? And it's not something you can say. How do you get other people to go along with what you suggest? Right? That's the question. How do you get them to behave in the way that you would have them behave? If you want them to complete an assignment by a certain date, how do you get them to behave in such a way that they will do that? If you want them to work together in a certain way, how do you get them to do that? If you want to motivate them and make them think a certain way, you want them to think that this is a good idea, and you want them to think that, it's worth their time to really try hard to do this certain thing. How do you get them to do that? There's multiple techniques. The techniques are different depending on the situation. They're different depending on the type of person. They're different depending on the task. It's very complicated. And anyone who really knows this stuff knows that there isn't a template answer that you can just say, and that's the right answer, because it varies by situation and it's rather complicated. I did a video a long time ago. I can't remember what it's called. It's like, I think it's how to answer the job interview question when you go to a job interview for a manager or a supervisor position, and they ask you, what's your leadership style? That's one of these cookie cutter questions that recruiters and things will ask because they've been told it's a good question to ask. It's another BS question, but they sometimes ask that for like management positions and things. And I gave a sort of rundown of how to answer that. So check that out. Okay. That's gives you more of a sort of proper answer. You're perfectly welcome, TQ. Thank you for the question. And thanks very much, Phil. Phil Blanks. Phil Blanks, ladies and gentlemen. Some people have you press the button and you get all these sound effects like applause, right? Phil Blanks, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for him. Shami Kapoor says, thank you for your kind help. You're absolutely welcome, Shami. Best of luck to you. Chris White says, hi, Bill. Panel interviews. Is there a strategy for those? Here's the deal. Generally speaking, a panel interview, it's really not that different from a regular interview, just that you've got two or more people on the other side of the table. Now, if they have a whole bunch of people, okay, really, there's nothing you really need to do differently fundamentally. But what you might want to do, which is a good idea, is first of all, try and find out who's going to be there, okay? And try and find out who they are. What's their role, okay? LinkedIn can be a great help with that. If you know the person's name, you can look them up on LinkedIn and you can see who they are. Now, if you find out that one person is an engineer, another person is a manager, a third person is a recruiter, and the fourth person is a psychologist, okay, that can give you some direction on how to answer Okay, if you know who you're speaking to and what their background is, that can really help. Okay. Now, apart from that, okay, the answers are going to be pretty much the same as in just a one-to-one interview. Beyond that, on a personal level, okay, you may find it possibly more intimidating than just having a one-on-one interview. Okay, if you're staring down 6 people, right? It can be a little intimidating. You know, you're out of your comfort zone. You're not on your own turf, right? You go to a place where it's unfamiliar, and you know all these people you don't know, and they start grilling you about something. Okay, so like especially if you're younger and you know you haven't really done a lot of interviews or public speaking or anything like that, it can be a little bit more nerve-wracking. But once again, the only way to overcome that, in my opinion and in my experience, is practice. The more interviews you do, the more you see that they ask the same questions essentially over and over and over again for the most part. And, you have a little bit of confidence in yourself. And it's almost like speaking to a room full of people. It's like a small version of that. If you've ever had to get up and do a presentation in front of a classroom of people, like a lot of us do in high school and things like this, it's a little bit like that. Okay. So just rehearsal. And once again, I know I sound like a broken record, but if you can do mock interviews, that really helps too. Like just a friend or a family member, get them to help you do pretend job interviews, because it feels weird and awkward. And the more of that you go through, the more you get used to it, the more you recognize that feeling, and the less it affects you. Okay, practice makes perfect. So when it comes to that, like the sort of nervousness element, just practice, and you'll be able to handle these in your stride before long. So that's so hopefully that makes sense. Adulting guide, PH. Okay. Adulting guide. How can I transition from an engineer to a manager as an external hire? Well, there's many ways you can. First of all, like probably the best way, okay? The best way would be if you have the opportunity to work in a manager type role internally, okay? That would be the best way. Then it's easier to jump sideways to another organization and say, I'm a manager. I can manage people, right? Okay, failing that, if you've ever been put on a project, like or on a work group, maybe they form a temporary team or something like that, where you have to direct the group or something, even just on a small scale, right? So you have experience leading people, managing people, right? So that's one way to do it. Okay. Another way is, you wait for the economy to be really good and they're just hiring anyone, and you put yourself in for a manager, right? So that's another way. But I mean, what really helps, okay, obviously, the thing that really is going to convince people that you can do this is when they interview you, if you have great soft skills. And by that, I mean great communication skills, great interpersonal skills, okay? So you can talk very well to people. You're very comfortable talking to people. You're very articulate. You're not obviously nervous. There's no red flags about being in the same room with you. Like, you don't talk so quiet that nobody can hear. You don't look at the floor the entire time you're talking to somebody. Things like this. That goes a long way to convince people that you can manage people, okay? If that's what we're talking about here. If you're just trying to manage projects, that's different, okay? You don't really need the people skills if you're just managing projects. The way you convince someone you can do that is having a track record of projects on your resume. Okay. Okay. I mean, there's different types of managers. There's people managers. There's sort of financial managers. There's project managers. There's different types, different skills involved. So it depends what we're talking about. With the financial side, there's an element of trust. Okay. If you are responsible for a budget or you're responsible for revenue generation, okay, like it's a revenue center or something like this, that's a whole different thing. That's like a third thing. Okay. That's where like, okay, do we trust this person enough? Have they demonstrated through experience that they can be trusted to manage a budget, that they make good decisions? They have good judgment when it comes to managing money and making decisions. You know, we could spend money on this or we could spend money on this, option A, option B, right? That comes from experience where you demonstrate your ability. And usually you start with small matters internally. Okay. And then if that goes well, they then give you gradually more, you know, sort of leeway to you can manage a larger amount of money or more capital before you have to get approval for things and so on. And then if you do that internally because they trust you with small things, so they trust you with bigger things, then, you know, it would be nice if they could change your job title to reflect that, and then you can jump sideways, right? So, I mean, there's many different ways you could do it, but it depends on the details. Hopefully that makes sense. William Richards says, I know you've said about not telling your boss if you're leaving for a new job, but what do I do if I need them as a reference? Yeah, you don't use them as a reference if you're leaving, okay? Like, this is the thing, okay? And I've seen some recruiters and things kind of, how can I put this? They lie to you. They try and put pressure on you. You know, give me your current employer's phone number so I can contact them. You know, I need their contact information so I can hire you. You know, like whatever, just some random BS that they give. If you're leaving, there's a conflict of interest because you don't want to jeopardize your current job until your new job is in the bag, right? I mean, this is pretty basic stuff. So the problem is, if they want a reference from your current job, right, presumably as part of the approval process to finalize your signing on with the new company or the new organization, right, that means that job isn't in the bag yet, right? It isn't secure. It isn't guaranteed. Okay? So if your current employer would have a negative reaction to the news that you are planning to leave, not that you're leaving, but you're planning to leave, then no dice, right? It's not within your interest to give them your current employer's contact information and have them call and say, oh, I understand this person's leaving. You know, were they a good employee? Yeah, that's terrible, right? So you have to accept the fact that if that's your situation, you can't use your current employer as a reference before your offer is final. Okay, it's just that simple. Now, you may be able to use a coworker or, you know, like things like that, but you can't tell your boss, you can't officially tell your company that you're leaving, right? Or even that you're planning to leave. That raises a lot of red flags. Okay? So you have to do it without it. Now, what usually works, and what's worked for me, is just to say, you know, to these people, like, look, you know, I'm currently employed there right now. My current employer does not know that I'm planning to leave at this moment. So I can't give you them as a reference. I'm sure you understand. Now, if they have a problem with that, that's suspicious, okay? Because what you're asking is completely reasonable, and it's a pretty typical situation. That happens quite often. So if for some reason that's unacceptable to them, that's raising a pretty big red flag with your new job prospect, okay? Your new potential employer. So that's what I would say. Okay, you should be able to give references from previous employers. You can give personal references. You can, you know, there should be a bunch of other things you can give them, okay? I mean, unless this is the first job you've ever had in your life, and you're trying to move to the second job you've ever had in your life, right? And you have no friends, and you have no professors at school, and you have no work colleagues or anything, right? then you might be in a bind. But other than that, you should be fine. Good morning, Fifi. It's good to see you here. Fatima says, thanks for your answer. My pleasure, Fatima. That was also an intelligent question. Adulting Guide PH. I like that title. It raises a lot of questions, but at the same time, I don't want to ask any of them. Says, awesome inputs, Bill. Thank you. Is it true that an MBA from a top-tier university is a real career accelerator? If yes, what are cheaper alternatives to this? Listen, I myself do not have an MBA from Harvard or Yale or any of the Ivy colleges in the States. So I can't give you a first-hand answer on that. However, what I have been given to understand and it's sort of been backed up with my experience is that unless you go to the absolute top schools, okay, like in the world, which still most of them are in the United States, okay, the fact that you've got that qualification from that university, that alone doesn't really matter. It really doesn't, in my experience. What does matter is the networking that you may have done while you were getting that qualification at that institution. Okay, so if you were in class with a bunch of other influential people, just like you would be in any school, okay? Like, I don't care if you're going to the local community college, if you do networking while you're there, you can capitalize on that later on. That helps to open doors simply because these people know you. They've worked with you. They know that A, you're not insane. 2, that you didn't, flunk out of the school. 3, there's nothing obviously wrong with you, right? Things like this, basic stuff like this. You're not a complete fraud, right? If they heard you speak in class, if the professor threw out a question and, you raised your hand and answered it. I mean, they know, okay, this person seems to know what they're doing. They seem to be a good, decent student, right? So, I mean, even on a fundamental level, you've got that working for you. It's called a personal reference, right? This is why using networking in other applications helps to get a job, right? Because already you stand out from every other stranger who has applied for a job. Someone sent in a resume, and that candidate, for all the employer knows, they could be insane. They could be a criminal. They could be a fraud. Everything on the resume could be an entire fabrication, right? You have no idea. So if there's a person that not that you know them very well, you're not going to hire them because you know them. That's ridiculous. And that it's often not done like that. It's that, okay, I know this person isn't insane and isn't a fraud and isn't a criminal. And I already kind of have seen them in real life, and they seem like a halfway decent person, from what I know. So I'll give them a shot first because at least I know that much about them, right? That's the value in networking, okay? Like, that's a fundamental value. Obviously, if you know people better than that, if they're not just a casual acquaintance, then there's other advantages too. But at a fundamental level, that's really what the value is, okay? But what you're asking is just having that qualification from that place, does that in itself open doors for you? Only if you're at the absolute, like the top tier, like the 1% top tier places. Every other place, I don't think so. And that's been borne out with what I've seen, for what that's worth. And there are a lot of cheaper alternatives to this. And it depends on your situation. I mean, all the way down, right? Going all the way down, to my thing, right? Unaccredited MBA, right? It's not for everyone. But It's the best bang for the buck. If you were just wanting to learn business so you could start your own company, you're not trying to impress anybody with a fancy degree. You're just trying to learn business so you can make solid business decisions, or you can do your own financial planning of your life, handle your personal finances in an intelligent way. You know, whatever reasons you have, personal reasons for learning business, okay? That's obviously, I'm biased to say this, but I created it for that purpose, right? $100 doesn't get any cheaper than that, really. But yeah, there's stuff at every level, okay? And the great thing about this wonderful connected world that we're in, distance education stuff, from what I've seen, has really come a long way. So, you know, that's an alternative too. Okay, most places, if you have an accredited MBA, they don't really care too much where you got it from, as long as it's accredited. So there are some pretty good alternatives there, options, good options there. I was going to do a series of proper edited videos about the MBA and what you do. I have a playlist called MBA on my channel. Look it up. There's, like, I did 3 or 4 videos where I talk all about MBAs, what you do, how useful it is, things like that. So if that's of any interest to you, check those out. Vintage Treasure 77 says Adulting Guide PH. Yeah, see, I'm not really, like, I'm not tuned into the latest lingo and the latest things that all the kids are talking about these days. I'm an old guy. So I just kind of smile and nod and go, yep. Okay. Chris White, makes sense. Thank you, Bill. My issue is who to keep eye contact with during these interviews, just the person who asked the question. You could always go in there with the Hulk Hogan eyes, right? You know, like that kind of thing. You know, just look like this at, you know, them the entire time. That probably in itself will lose you the interview. I don't care. You could be Albert Einstein, but if you do that, that's just weird. Always look at the person who's speaking. Okay, like that's usually a good rule of thumb. If someone's talking to you, look them in the eye. You know, like look them in the eye, I don't know, 80% of the time. That's normal. You occasionally look away, but you maintain eye contact. If you're answering them, okay, if they ask the question and you're answering them, maintain eye contact with them. I'd say 80%, 80, 90% of the time, you know, you can look away, right? Now, if you're speaking to a panel, you've got 3 or 4 people in front of you, right? One person asks the question. So you talk mostly to them, but you also look at the other people, you know, while you're giving your answer, right? And that should be good. That's a good way to do it. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, maybe something that you might want to practice, right? And once again, if you're not just going to practice that in your everyday life, once again, mock interviews. That's a great thing you can practice doing with mock interviews. Natalija Bogdanova. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. You've got a fantastic name. Thank you, Bill, for your videos and all your help. I have found a new job recently and got hired. Congratulations, Natalija. That's great news. You should be very proud and very relieved, and you know, enjoy that really awesome feeling there. You've earned it. Jason says, greetings from Japan. Greetings from Canada, Jason. I like Japan. There's a couple of companies that are based in Japan, of which I'm a really big fan. I think they've done a fantastic job running their company. I think they're shining examples of how to run a company, how to make great products, how to have great relationships with your customers, all that stuff. Like 10 out of 10. There's several companies in Japan that I think are absolutely crushing it. I've never been to Japan, but I suspect it's something to do with the Japanese corporate culture that I think is really great. And thank you to Chris. Yeah, so if you have any questions, please ask them. We got 34 people here. 34 people. You guys are all awesome. Every single one of you. Now, I actually, believe it or not, I actually wrote some notes for myself. I usually don't. I usually just wing the entire thing. That's how they're so professional. You know, now you know my secrets here. But I wrote down a couple of things. But the catch is that I haven't read them in a while. So I'd be reading them for the first time. But I see the feed is moving, so I'm going to do it. Once again, just as a reminder, on this week, late Friday, actually it's like 2 a.m. where I am on Saturday morning, I'll be live doing another live stream on the other stream that I'm doing these days called Beyond Employment. So if you're just joining me here and you've never heard of this is new for you. I do a live stream where I talk about how to break away from the life of being an employee, where you're working for someone else, okay? You've got a little bit of a ceiling on how much money you can make, okay? And you live the life of an employee. Essentially, you're an exploited corporate slave. That's putting it very harshly, but you know, to varying degrees, if you're an employee, you kind of are. And if you're content doing that for the rest of your life, that's cool. You know, a lot of people do it. It's the default thing to do. However, if you are interested in exploring alternatives, okay, working for yourself, for example, is the most obvious alternative. That's what I talk about on this live stream on Fridays. So if you feel so inclined, you can join me for that. And that's happening for the next 4 weeks, early Saturday morning, so late night on Friday. For those in Europe, it should be waiting for you in the morning when you wake up on Saturday. Depending on when you wake up, of course. Some people like to have a pretty rowdy Friday night. They might not be waking up for a while after that. So, but hey, I know that when you do, you'll want to learn about entrepreneurship and small business and working for yourself and making your fortune. So join me then. Vintage Treasure 77 says, my questions are not appearing on screen. Well, I can see that. I can see that, Vintage Treasure 77. So I'm not sure what the problem is. If you're dropping a bunch of F-bombs and stuff, it might be censored out. It might be like, I don't know, YouTube might be not allowing those through or something. I'm not sure. Jason says, I'm a Jamaican living in Japan seeking an SDR role. What's SDR? Don't use acronyms when you're talking broadly, because I'm not familiar with every acronym in every industry. It's just not possible. So please spell out any acronyms. Remote. Okay. How do you say that? Sai Shrey? Hello from India. Hello, Sai. Sai or say. It's great to see you here. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please ask. Jason says, I have a bottle of sake waiting for your visit. Yes. I will join you for that. If ever I come to Japan, we'll have a date. And that would be fun. You have to serve it at body temperature, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's my understanding. Sai says, I've recently graduated with a bachelor's. I intend to change my job after working for 4 months. What could be my best reason to portray in front of another employee? What exactly do you mean by that? Like, what's your reason for leaving? Is that what you're asking? You intend to change your job after 4 months. What's the best reason to portray in front of another employee? I'm not sure. It depends on what the culture is at that organization. some places, if you mention, that you're leaving, that's interpreted as a sign of disloyalty, and they immediately take action against you. Other places, you have employees like ratting each other out to the boss all the time. There's all kinds of situations. So, I mean, it depends really on what situation you're in. I don't know if you'd have to give a reason. I mean, I know India does some interesting kind of HR practices, but at least from my perspective, being in the West, but, I don't think at any point you really need to give a reason. I know they prompt you for it. It's common that employers will want to know, at least they say they want to know. They'll conduct exit interviews and things like this. If you're having a conversation with your boss may ask you, but you don't have to give a reason. It's actually not to your advantage to give a reason. You don't want to tell your boss, oh yeah, my boss, they were terrible. They annoyed me so much, and I'm so miserable here because of them that I have to leave. Like, it would not be within your best interest to say that. It's unnecessary. The only thing that matters is you're leaving, okay? And you don't want, in addition to you leaving the company, you don't want to piss them off and make them angry by finding fault with them. Obviously, something didn't work for you, okay? And what's best in most situations, especially business situations, is not to voice that stuff, okay? It's not to your advantage. Yadu Gopakumar says, your advice for body language and hand movements when talking to people. Can you not see the beautiful, graceful hand movements that I'm doing right now, doing this kind of thing, right? Nothing more professional than that. Instant, it'll impress everybody that meets you when you do stuff like that. Listen, I'm kind of hunched over in my chair here, but it's okay to talk with your hands a little bit. You can make a couple of, smaller gestures, right? Don't be waving your arms around in like big things. Usually that's not really protocol, right? Okay. Now, body language. Remember the sort of golden rule. Whenever you're talking to somebody, you're interacting with somebody, okay? You want them to feel that you are super interested in everything they're saying. You're really enjoying the experience of interacting with them, speaking to them. Everything they say to you, should be fascinating, right? At least that's how you want them to feel. Even if it's boring, you want them not to feel like you're bored. So, don't be like, like someone's talking to me and I'm just like, yeah, right? Because I'm communicating through my body language that I'm bored and I'm not enjoying this experience dealing with you. Okay. Part of being a good people manager is you try and give everyone the impression that you're super interested, you're super excited, and you're enjoying every minute of interacting with that person. Okay. So, I mean, it's a big topic. I can't go into a lot of detail here, but your body language and hand movements should go towards that, okay? So don't make it appear like you're bored. Don't make it appear anything negative, like you're nervous or, you're angry, right? I should do a video on that. It's actually pretty interesting stuff. Like there were several things that I thought were really interesting, like, sort of palms up, palms out. That was like a very receptive kind of thing. Like here, it's like, I'm trying to do it so the camera can see me, but like this is a very positive gesture. Palms down, like this, that's sort of a negative, like power kind of gesture in a negative way, right? It's not welcoming, right? You want to be open, with your arms here. You don't want to be closed. things like this. Same with your legs. If you're sitting at a table, people can see your legs, your feet, that sort of thing. Same idea. So read up on that stuff if you're interested in that. There's a lot of interesting things there. Okay, Jason was, SDR, Sales Development Representative. Okay, I'm Jamaican living in Japan, seeking a sales development representative role. Any advice? Well, listen, that's one of those titles that can vary depending on industry, region, the type of product, the type of product you do, whether it's industrial or, consumer. But listen, it's got the word sales in it, okay? And sales development is presumably some role where you're trying to, do sales, or you're looking to meet customers' needs, discover what the needs are, discover what their situation is, and then see if you can sell them a product or service, right? So if that's the job you're going for, in my opinion, okay, you guys hear me talk about getting a job through networking. You hear me talk about that a lot. If you're trying to get a job as a sales, like in sales or sales development, that's where I would really, really use those skills. Get a job through networking. Contact hiring managers proactively, okay? Figure out where you want to work. What are the companies that are near you? Or that, if you're doing it remote, then you could do it like anywhere in the world, but figure out where you want to work, and then proactively contact all the hiring managers in those organizations and reach out to them and demonstrate your sales abilities, because essentially you're selling yourself, right? And, anyone that's watched my channel for any length of time, I mean, there's this one thing I'm always talking about. It's sending out sort of a template message to potential hiring managers saying, hello, I'm here. I'm great at this. I solve this problem. If ever you're looking for that, please let me know, because I'd love to work at your company, right? And I mean, that's very basic and very primitive, but it's sales ability right there, right? So that's the best way to get hired. It's to get hired based on your demonstration of your skills, rather than getting hired because they've read a resume that says supposedly you have these skills, right? Okay, seeing is believing. And you can go a lot further when you demonstrate, how awesome you are, how talented you are, how professional you are, right to the hiring manager, the person that's making the decision on who they should hire. Okay, if you want to go deeper, I've got what I feel is a great video on that. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. Just go to the search box in YouTube and just type The Company's Expert, right? My channel. How Successful People Get Jobs. There's a video where I walk you through, like, you get a screenshot of my computer desktop showing you how you find the individuals, how you contact them, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Show people you have the skills, and that'll sell you. Oh, my mouth's getting dry. John Garvey says, what's the most common mistake you have in a manager role interviews? Well, where do I begin? I mean, kind of like what I was saying, like, I don't know, half an hour ago, like in this stream, manager role interviews, it's like, once again, it's like doing an interview, talking to somebody about how good they are at math, right? You can't actually do math. It's not like they give you a questionnaire or a test. Instead, you have to give them an interview to see if they're good at math, right? That's kind of what it's like. It's like you can't demonstrate it directly. So it boils down to what the interviewer thinks is a good test to test for that, in this case, management skills. Okay? Like, the way you do it in the real world, like, when people need to do this stuff properly at higher levels, is they basically, first of all, they look at somebody's resume. Let's see a track record of success managing, okay? If you have a track record of success, the interview doesn't really matter that much because you've proven that you can do it. If I had to hire somebody and I have a candidate that I've already heard of because they've been in my business and they've been a player in my local industry or something, I already know them by reputation, right? The only thing the interview really is for is whether we get along, right? And I can ask sort of general questions about, what's your philosophy for, how to do a certain, like how to run an operation, or, what products to develop, or, you can have like conversations like that. But it's just to see if you get along. You can't really test for, whether the person knows how to manage something. You have to rely on their track record. Now, the only question is whether their track record is accurate or it's a fabrication. If you've never heard of them, it could be a fabrication, right? So that's where we get into what recruiters do, where they don't actually know. So they've all sort of gotten together and they've decided, okay, these are the questions to ask, and this is the answer that we need to hear, right? It's not based on anything. It's almost like a flavor of the month or flavor of the year or the decade of like, what's the right answer, And I know that's very wishy-washy. I'm not really helping by saying this, but that's really kind of what it's about. So if it were me, I would go on YouTube. I would like go on the internet and see like, what are the questions they're going to ask? I would type in manager role interview questions into Google. I'd see like, what are the common questions that people are asking to determine that in an interview, supposedly, and see what people say the right answer is. And I'd like, sort of go down those. I don't do management interviews that way. I never have. It doesn't work. It's silly. It's usually what people who don't know what they're doing do, right? So, you know what I mean? And if you're talking with a manager, like an actual manager, like a vice president or something, is interviewing you for a management role, then it tends to depend on whether you have the same worldview and opinions as that vice president. That's really what it depends on, Like if they don't know you by reputation and that's not enough, sorry, I'm hearing myself, and these are not really very helpful. It's, not something you can just do. But that's kind of my opinion on it for what it's worth. I don't know if that's helpful. But it's a very intelligent question. There's a lot of people struggling with precisely that problem in the world of HR. If you don't know a candidate, you have no clue who this person is, they've given you a resume where they've said that they've managed some stuff, how do you verify to see if they're a good manager? Right? Beyond asking about like, what would you do if you had an employee that did this, right? What I find is that if they just ask you about your experiences and your stuff, I mean, that's pretty good. So like the whole thing is just totally fraught with errors. So a lot of times you get what you're asking about, the mistakes. A lot of times recruiters who've never managed people themselves, they've never managed projects themselves, they've never been in the role that they're hiring you for, like say a general manager or, a functional manager. They themselves have never been in that role. They have no clue how to do that role, okay, other than what they read on the internet, just like you, okay? The biggest mistakes is that they get some piece of misinformation that, all managers should do this. And it's completely out to lunch. But then when they interview you, if they don't hear you saying that thing, they say, oh, well, this person doesn't know what they're doing. They come to that false conclusion, right? Maybe they've read those posts on LinkedIn that I was talking about earlier, It's like they convince me that leadership is whatever we want it to be, things like this. Hello from Turkey. Capital capital Ankara, right? If I recall. Asilkan, if I'm saying that right. Asilkan Var. Sir, my question is that should we be more cheerful in an interview more than our normal, or is it fine to be neutral or be yourself? Well, it depends what you're like. Like, if you want to be yourself, what do you like? If you're just kind of, yeah, what do you want? I don't know. That might not be great. It helps to be a little bit more upbeat. And I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about something here where you need some soft skills, right? If you're interviewing for a technical level job where interpersonal skills and communication skills are not really that important, or they're not prioritized anyway, put it that way. If you're going for a supervisor job or something like that, or just anything across the board, if it were me, I would say, be yourself, but be a really good version of yourself. Be super pleasant to deal with, very accommodating, okay? Very polite, right? Things like this. Even if you're not feeling it in the moment. See, the problem is when you go to a job interview, you're probably feeling nervous. You might be feeling miserable. You might be hating every second of it. So don't let that show, okay? Because it's not going to be to your advantage to make them aware through your body language that, or how you act and what you say, that you're not into this. You don't feel good. You feel nervous. You just want to go home, right? You want to end this interaction with them so you can go home, right? Okay, be cheerful, be upbeat, be polite, be professional. Pavel says, what is the interview process or typical questions for high-level positions, director or above? Well, they vary. There's a couple of standard questions that you only get sort of at a high level. The main one, and I've done a video on this one a long time ago, the main one is if you're like a higher level manager, say you're an executive, they may ask you, how do you get accurate information about what's going on in your operation? Okay, that's relatively common. Okay, so they may ask that. But you see, the thing is, when you're hiring at that level, it's not like you're hiring an employee, like a worker, okay, at a low level. They don't give you cookie cutter questions. I mean, that's not how you treat people. These people have to think. It's a thinking role where you need good judgment, you need experience. It's not a doing role where you work with your hands, right? Okay, so it usually doesn't go like that. Okay, like it's usually not even done by a recruiter, okay? They may get recruiters, they get recruiters to set up the meeting, to be in attendance, to do things, but usually the person that's across the table from you that's evaluating you is some kind of high-level manager or shareholder of some kind. Okay, that's usually how those things go. So it's not like they have like a list of cookie-cutter questions. So tell me about yourself. What are your strengths? They don't really do that at an executive level. It's not like that. It's basically what you stand for, like what are your beliefs? Like, for example, I could say, if you want to grow a business operation, you want it to make more money, be more successful, what's your approach? And I would say, well, I believe in quality. That's number one. For me, I believe that, if you do the quality and the customers are in love with your product, everything else follows, right? Another person might come from a more accounting background. They say, well, I cut costs. I care about efficiency. I believe that if you get rid of all the waste and you really, eliminate all the extra cost, you'll be profitable, and that will give you resilience against, maybe even your sales go down, but it's okay because you're still profitable. You're making a much better margin and you can weather the storms, and you can then spend more on marketing if, your sales go down and get them back up. You're right. So it's more about that kind of thing. It's like, what do you represent? What's your approach to things? What do you believe? It's about basically your beliefs on where the focus should be when you're facing a certain problem in a certain situation. Okay, the more intelligent interviews at that level basically are around things like that. Vintage Treasure 77. How do I convince a new employer that I'll be able to fill gaps quickly in a career shift? How do I convince a new employer that I'll be able to fill in gaps? What gaps do you mean? Like gaps in employment? Like, are you hiring people to fill gaps? If you could rephrase that, Vintage Treasure 77, if you could rephrase, I don't quite understand what you mean. So just if you give me some more information, I'll be happy to answer that. Diego Rodriguez says, is it right to ask the interviewer if there's any in-training for the position you're applying for? It's not wrong to ask that. That's a reasonable question. However, depending on the details and the situation and who you're talking to, they could interpret your question to mean that you're saying that you need training to do it. Okay? In which case, that would be a negative. So you don't want to give that impression. Okay? Right? Like if I say, do you have a training plan? Could I ask? The implication is that I need training, right? Like if they say, oh, yes, we do have a training program. You say, okay, great. It's a good thing I don't need it, right? Then the question is, well, why did you ask that question in the first place? The implication is that if you're asking about training, you need training, right? So you don't want to necessarily give that impression. What you would like them to believe is that if they hire you, very quickly, you can get into that role. You know what you're doing. You're productive after a very short period of time. You're over the learning curve, and you're helping them make money. That's what they want, right? So all things being equal, I wouldn't ask it. It's not a bad question, but I just wouldn't want to risk perhaps them interpreting it like that. But that's the thing about job interviews. I mean, everybody, some of the time will second guess that and they'll do the opposite. I mean, you're just playing the odds here. Ziggy Stardust, I know that's a David Bowie thing, isn't it? I know that name. I think you might have been on here before. In the UK, it's common practice to have maths, English, and ICT, whatever that is, skills exams. Even when people hold certificates in these subjects, it's often a part of the application process prior to the interview. No, I don't think it's common practice in the UK to do that across the board. Maybe for some industries, yeah, certainly. And it's common practice to do that in certain industries in every country. But I don't think in the UK they give everyone a test in math, right? And English. I mean, if you're going for a director position, they're not going to give you a math test. But whatever, in your industry, I don't doubt that you're right. Maybe for a worker level position, possibly for something a little bit above the worker level. Diego Rodriguez, in training that you would be ready to learn to fit in the position the most efficient and get fully functional operation the fastest way. Oh, I see what you're saying. Onboarding. Okay, the term for that is usually onboarding, where you're overcoming the learning curve. Usually when you start a job, in the very beginning, you're not very productive because you're still learning the ropes, you're finding your way around. You don't know where the bathroom is yet, right? So you want to shorten that learning curve, okay? You want to be onboarded very quick and get to the point where you're productive. To learn to fit in the position the most efficient. Okay, so I understand what you mean by that now. What was your question? Is it right to ask the interviewer if there's any in training for the position? I thought I already answered that. I mean, my answer still stands. Like, okay, you know, if there's training, great. But if you're specifically asking them if there's training, you know, all things being equal, they'll make an assumption that you are asking because you need it, right? And as I said, you don't want to give that impression. John Garvey says, thank you. I agree with what you say. It was more common trip hazards. What? It was more common trip hazards you have seen repeated. John Garvey. Now let's get back to your question here. What's the most common mistake you have manager? Oh, I see. Okay. Like the mistake the candidate makes in this kind of thing. Okay. The most common mistake. Well, listen, like I said, when those interviews are done properly, it's usually a less structured conversation between you and the hiring manager, which in this case would be usually some other senior manager. And I mean, where do I begin? There's all kinds of things you can screw up. Okay. Saying negative things about employees, about anything really, you really have to watch what you're doing there. I mean, the general rule is not to say anything negative about anyone or anything, right? That's sort of the general rule. You try to avoid that. If you deviate from that and you start saying, oh yeah, you know, this is bad, these people are bad, people who think this is bad, you know, that's where you can just shoot yourself in the foot, you know, doing that sort of thing. Any issues with communication skills, if you say something inappropriate, that can essentially eliminate you on the spot because it's a red flag. If you have some kind of issue with communicating professionally, pleasantly, you know, with the other person, that's going to trip you up pretty quickly. Just be positive, and you know, if they ask you a question and you say like, I don't know, or you're stumped, you know, and you can't answer anything, obviously that would be an issue. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you can get wrong. It's easier to say like how to do it right than what not to do, because there's so many things you could get wrong. Basically, you have to click with the other person, and I mean, that's just random statistical probability whether you do or not. It's not really something you have control over. Shravan says, how to overcome fear at the time of interview for an experienced professional. Thank you. Well, how to overcome fear. The way to overcome fear is practice, right? The more you practice, the better you get. It also, I mean, all that stuff is linked. Like, for example, the more you practice, the more confident you are, okay? The more confident you are, the less you feel nervous. So, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or, you know, anything like that, but I mean, I know these things are all connected, right? Practice makes perfect. You know, if you fear interviews, if you're not good talking to strangers, or you get very nervous when they sort of ask you questions, you know, or it's social anxiety or something like that, the way to break a lot of that is just practice. So that's why I say do mock interviews, because the mock interview, a pretend interview with a friend or family member, you do it over and over and over again. And it drills you in all the aspects pretty much of doing a job interview. Okay, you rehearse the content, like what your answers are going to be. You know, you sort of get practice dealing with nervousness, practice dealing with body language, practice dealing with like every aspect of it, right? So that's usually the way to go. Practice makes perfect. Asil Kanvar says, thank you for your insightful comments, sir. Also, yes, Ankara is the capital of Turkey. Good. I'm glad I was right. It's when I say these things, you know, I worry that I get it wrong, and then I look like I look a fool, which has never happened before, by the way. You know, this is the thing. When you put yourself out there, you risk making a fool of yourself, you know? But you got to overcome that, or else you'll never do anything. And you pick your battles, right? I've chosen to do this, so there you go. Ben Noble says, question. I just got an official offer for a job. Congratulations. I bungled the interview question when asked about my salary expectations, and I gave a range first. I got an offer, but I want a little more. Advice? Well, I did an hour-long video on salary negotiation. You can always check that out. Go to the search box, type in the company's expert salary negotiation. There's a really long video where I talk about all the principles. In a nutshell, negotiation is all about options, right? If you only have one option that you could do, like practically, and that is to accept their offer, then you really don't have anything to negotiate with, right? So being able to have power to say no, that offer is not good enough. I need you to change this number to this. And then we got a deal, right? The ability to do that where it isn't a bluff comes from having other alternatives. If they say no, you say, okay, well, then I'm sorry. I regretfully, this doesn't work for me. So thank you, but no thank you, right? You know, and then you take the other option that is better for you, right? Okay, so hypothetically, let's pretend that you got a second job offer where they pay you, I don't know, let's say 100, okay? And these people are offering you 90, right? And if that was the case, you'd be able to go back to them and say, like, look, I need you're offering me 90. I need that to be at least 100, preferably 105, before I can accept it. Okay? So let me know if that's possible. Thank you, goodbye. You know? And if they say no, you say, okay, not a problem. Well, you know, makes sense. You got to do what you got to do. But it doesn't make sense for me to reject, to accept this. So thank you very much. And then you go take the other job where they're paying you 100, right? Okay. So, and any bluff that you make, you have to be ready for your bluff to be called. Okay. That's usually how this stuff goes, unless it doesn't matter to you. Like you're just trying for this. And if it doesn't work out, you're still fine. Right. But if it's important, you have to be prepared for any bluff to be called. So, you know, people don't like to hear this. They want to hear, what words do I say to persuade them to give me more money? And I'm saying that you can ask, but usually people don't give money when you don't need to, right? I mean, I'm giving you the manager's perspective. Everybody wants more money. Everybody feels they should be paid more, right? The default blanket answer is no. I would love to pay everybody more money. I can't. Okay. So, you know, is this person like, do I need to pay more money? If I say no and this person walks, that causes me pain. In that case, I will have to pay a little more money to avoid pain. Right. But if this person is bluffing, which most of the time employees are, I'm just going to say no and then have them accept it anyway. Right? And then I win because I've got them for the original amount. Right? That's how this stuff works. So get more options if you want to negotiate from a position of power. Maybe an alternative is for you to stay where you are if you're employed right now and you don't need to jump to this other job. Right? Like maybe that's an option. I don't know what your situation is, right? In which case you do have another option. If it doesn't work for you, why take all the risk in moving employers just to get a tiny little more amount more money? It might not be justified. So if you want to make sure that you will get paid more, get other job offers, okay, for higher amounts, and then whichever way anything works out, you're good. That's the answer. I mean, there's no easy answer. It requires work. And the other thing is that a lot of people talk about average salaries like market price, okay? I get tons of comments, people saying like, well, when they ask me about salary, I just say, I'll accept market price. It's like, yeah, that's not a good answer because first of all, market price is the average amount. Are you an average employee? It also depends on the company paying the average for each job, which most companies don't. They pay either above average or below average in a given region, right? The other issue with that is that not every job has an easily discoverable average price, right? For example, I live in the city of Winnipeg, Canada. In Winnipeg, Canada, there might be a very specific position, okay? Wastewater facility treatment general manager. What's the market price for that job? There might be 5 people with that title in this location. So how do you find out what the market price is, what the average price is? You can't, right? Okay, there is no market price. This is the issue. How much you pay for an employee is very abstract. There is no right answer what somebody is worth. People like to simplify it down to various different techniques. All of them which give a different answer, by the way, on how much an employee should be paid, right? You're worth whatever you can justify, basically. Okay, so you can't really go that way either. It doesn't hold any water. You can make whatever argument you want. It doesn't hold any water. If the person just doesn't agree, then they don't agree. They're going to offer you what they're going to offer. All you need to do is know what makes sense for you to accept. And then if it's not good enough, get alternate options. Then you can actually negotiate. Anyway, it's a complicated topic, very complicated. There's a lot to it, much more than I can get into today. But hopefully that helps. I have several videos on salary, but do a search. I have like one that's an hour long, and that might give you some insight. Knowledge gaps. Vintage 77. What were you talking about? Vintage. How do I convince a new employer that I'll be able to fill gaps quickly in a career shift? Knowledge gaps. Basically what you're saying is, how do you convince an employer that you're highly trainable? Is that what you're saying? And the best way to do that is just have a history of being trainable, right? If you have a resume where you've only done one position for the last 10 years at different companies, I welded steel at this company. Then I moved to this other company and I welded steel. And then I moved to this other company and I welded steel. It's like, that doesn't really show that you're retrainable, does it? Right? But if you have a track record of, you started here and then you moved into this role and then you moved over here and then you moved into this role, then you moved over there, then you moved over here, like that kind of suggests that, okay, you can pick things up. And then after you moved there, you got promoted again, that would convince me that, you are highly trainable and, any kind of gap in your skill set within reason won't be a big issue for you. Okay, where did I lost where I was here. Here we go. Ben Noble. Ben Noble, my buddy Ben. It's for a web developer position. The offer is, okay, were we talking about something earlier? Ben Noble? Oh yeah, okay. Okay, here we go. I got an official offer. I bungled the question, asked about salary expectations. Okay, gotcha. So coming down here, Ben Noble. It's for a web development position. The offer is on the lower end of the range I requested. I'm only thinking of asking $2K more. Is this normal ask for more in this situation? $2K, I'm assuming that, depending on where you are and what currency that is, it's not that much. So what you could maybe say is like, look, here, the vacation is fine, benefits are fine, sick days are fine, work conditions is fine, shift work is fine, all the stuff they're asking, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. You know, is there something that they wanted from you? They wanted you to start immediately or something. You could say, look, just give me, look, I changed this to 2K and you got a deal. We can end this and I can start whenever you want. Like basically what you're bargaining with is saying like, let's expedite this process. Let's make it very easy. Just give me this and, you know, this is going to be painless and quick and free of issues. You can try that. You know, that's something I would do. And do I ask the HR lady who sent the email for more, or the hiring manager? First time I'd countered. I don't know, and I don't think it matters. I mean, if you've met them both, you know, and it doesn't matter, protocol means you could talk to either of them, which is kind of strange. I would talk to the person that's the most agreeable, obviously. But usually the way this works is, I mean, you're communicating back and forth with somebody, so you would ask them. And you're not going to ask. Like, you're not going to ask. If you say, could you give me more money? The answer will be no. Okay, you're not asking. You're saying, I propose you give me more money and then this will happen. Right? Like, it's not an ask. Okay? It's a proposal. If you give me more money, I will do this. If you give me 2K more, then you got a deal and I can start whenever you want. Okay, you're informing them of that scenario that you're willing to do. Okay, so presumably you would do that with the person you're already communicating with. I wouldn't carry out an exchange with somebody and then when you've got this request, you then go to somebody else. That's not great protocol. That's actually can be a red flag depending on how it's done. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, like there's a protocol for like this is part of communication skills, like in an organization. If you're having an exchange with somebody, you then don't sort of have a private conversation about the same topic with somebody else. In the same way that if you have a conflict with somebody, it's bad protocol to then, you know, if you can't get an agreement there, to then, without telling them, go over their head to the boss, right? You escalate it to the boss. That's usually a bad way of handling things. The other parties will not appreciate it if that's how you do it. Okay. I know that that's usually the default way of doing these things when you're at a lower level. It's sort of like without any more sophisticated communication skills, that's what people tend to do. It's actually a bad way of handling it. Okay. So this is, in a way, it's kind of a form of that. If you sort of talk to somebody else about, you know, I want more money, but you're supposed to be dealing with this other person who's trying to finalize the contract. Ziggy Stardust. Cultural anthropology. What were we talking about, Ziggy Stardust? Oh, I guess I missed your question or your comment. Something about Elon Musk. Elon Musk says he asked interviews to describe a scenario where they faced, overcame a major problem. Those are really fun. Yeah, this is the problem, okay? If you listen to these billionaire celebrities like Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, even like Steve Jobs, people like this, Jeff Bezos, usually what they say is just out to lunch. Like, you know, they have some like non-standard thing that most people would agree doesn't really work practically. Okay. And even if it does, great. What significance does that have? Everyone has their own way of hiring. HR is well known for being very unscientific and very error prone. You know, the area of uncertainty, the number one area of uncertainty in any business is the marketing side, but it's actually more certain than their HR processes. Okay, like things like recruitment and selection. It's much more of a smoke and mirrors, hocus pocus thing. Okay. The reason why it's not regarded as such is because, quite frankly, for lower level employees, like worker level, they honestly don't care. They just need a warm body in that role. And this is something that surprises a lot of young people, because I get this sort of standard response is when they find out how imprecise, shall we say, a lot of the hiring process is, like with these silly job interview questions, as an example. You know, the comment coming back from a lot of people is, well, don't you want to hire the best? The answer is no. They don't care about hiring the best. They need a person, and you'll do, you know? Now, obviously, when they're not going to tell you this, or they're not going to indicate this, because it's, you know, it's not something people want to hear, right? But that is the reality. So even though the process is completely flawed in being able to assess a person, they're not really working too hard at that problem at the worker level. Because, like, hey, you know, if this person doesn't work out, we take our best guess. And if this person doesn't work out, we'll just hire somebody else. What's important to us is that, we ticked every box. We got all our ducks in the row. We went through the standard process and followed policy. And if we do that, no one can fire me for doing anything wrong if I selected the wrong person. Just this person didn't work out. Oh, well, we'll just get another person, right? It's a very casual attitude towards this stuff. You know, that's kind of the reality of this stuff. Anyway. So that's the thing. Like, that's one of the reasons why, like a lot of people who give advice for how to get hired are recruiters. Now, I'm not knocking recruiters necessarily. There's some great ones. I've said this a lot, but it's true. There are some great ones. However, you do get a skewed perspective, okay? It's like asking somebody who's trying to sell you a car to teach you about cars, right? You want to learn about cars. Let's ask someone who's trying to sell a car. And obviously, what they teach you about cars is going to be skewed. If they're trying to sell you a used car, they might say, oh, well, the best cars are used because when they're new, they tend to have a lot of teething problems. It's never been run before. A bunch of things, weren't put on correctly at the factory. So it fails a few times on the roads to discover the flaws, get those fixed. And then once it's been run in and it's used, then it's reliable. They might say something like that. It has a certain logic to it. But obviously they're trying to sell you a used car, right? So, I mean, their perspective is skewed. So for that reason, get your advice from not a single source. Get it from, a good cross-section of different sources. I'm not a recruiter. I mean, I've had to hire people and fire people and manage people. I'm giving you the perspective from a hiring manager. I'm giving you the perspective of someone who's hired recruiters and hired recruiting companies and staffing companies. And I've had to deal with managing people for many, many years. And I'm giving you a different perspective than recruiters. And one of the reasons I feel there's a need for this, that's why I do this, is because, it's like a used cars salesman trying to educate you about cars. They have a very skewed perspective. For a start, people who have jobs, the number one way people get jobs is not going through a recruiter. It's through networking. You have a friend of a friend's brother that works at the company. Can you put in a good word for me? They say, sure. Yeah, I know somebody. He's my brother's friend's friend. I've met him. He's a good guy. They say, okay, well, tell him to send in a resume. Right? So you send in a resume. The hiring manager says, sure, we'll give him an interview. He seems like he's qualified, right? That's how people get jobs. It's networking. It's some form of networking. it's not actually the most common method to go through a recruiter. But if you get all your advice from recruiters, that's not what they're going to say, right? They're going to say, oh no, you must go through a recruiter. Don't try and get around the recruiter because it won't work. Incorrect. Anyway, I've sort of been on my soapbox here for a while. Let's see. Let's come down to earth here. My pleasure, John Garvey. Okay, JJ, how to say in a decent way if I'm a marketer, but I would like to change my job position, such as an HR role. Okay, well, that's you're changing careers, right? You're going from being a marketer to working in HR. So that's a career change. So there's a ton of videos out there on how to do a career change. And it's apropos that you bring this up because what I was just saying about not going through a recruiter, here's a perfect example. Changing careers, right? What's the first question a recruiter is going to have for you? It's going to be, how many years of experience do you have in HR? And because you're trying to change careers, your answer is going to be 0. And what's their response going to be? It's going to be, well, then, obviously you're not qualified, right? So that's the problem with going through recruiters. It's very hard to change careers, but go through a recruiter. Because for a recruiter, they use that magical metric, right? Years of experience, which we all know is very flimsy. It's a very flimsy indicator of somebody's value, right? You could be an extremely capable person. You could be like one of the smartest people on the planet and say like, look, I want to work in HR. And they say, oh, it says here you haven't worked in HR. So how could you possibly know what to do? So no dice, sorry. Right? When you're changing careers, you don't go through a recruiter, you use networking. Talk to the hiring managers. Say, look, something to the effect of, look, you contact a hiring manager, you say, look, I've had, 10 years experience in companies. I've worked as a marketer, okay? But I have had a chance to interact with people in HR. I would like to work in HR. I find it absolutely fascinating. I believe I have a lot of skills and talents I could bring to HR. I'm very passionate about it. And if ever you're looking for somebody, or you could say, I also have this certificate or this training or this online course in HR. If ever you're looking for somebody to join the HR department, even if it's a junior role, please let me know. I would love to work at your company in this role. I think I can really bring some value. Goodbye. Something like that. And you throw that out to a lot of hiring managers, and lo and behold, one of them just happens to be needing to hire someone in the HR department. And they'll say, you know what? This person, I like their passion. They seem to be very professional. They seem to be very passionate. And I like their initiative, how they reached out to me and had a very pleasant, professional conversation. This message makes me want to respond and say yes. So based on just that as a sample of what it's like working with you, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to bring you in for an interview. Okay? And already that's further than you'd have ever gotten with a lot of recruiters. Most recruiters, they look at your resume, they don't see HR experience, so your resume doesn't make the cut. They don't even give you an interview. Abdul Wahad, if I'm saying that right, I'm sure I'm not, says, I have an interview with a starter company that works with the Salesforce ecosystem, and I think starter companies focus on interview details more than large companies. Can you give me your opinion? Okay, when you're talking about, you mean like a startup, a small company just starting up is not revenue positive yet. Usually that's the definition of startup. Yes, the one thing is that they care much more about precisely who they bring in. Okay, so yes, they will care more about the details of the interview because they care much more about precisely who they bring into the organization. They don't have a lot of money and they don't have a lot of chances if they make mistakes. So they have to get it right. So they're watching it more closely. Large organizations, they tend to not be as finicky, and it's very forgiving, generally speaking. If they hire someone that doesn't work out, oh well, as long as we went through the right process, no big deal, no harm, no foul. We'll just hire another person. Hopefully this person will work out. Ben Noble. It's for web development position, lower level. Okay, this was the 2K bump there. Follow up. Can't I just say, okay, I'll take the original offer? Well, I thought that they gave you an offer, but you're wanting more than the offer. So the question was, how can I ask for like an extra 2K or something? So now you're saying, can't I just say, okay, I'll take the original offer? Yeah, if you want the original offer, sure. I don't have a second job lined up. Okay. That's fine. But all that, like what I was saying is that, I mean, that's perfectly fine. It's not a problem. It's just that if you're trying to negotiate with them for a better offer, unless you have other options, you can't really negotiate, properly. You can bluff. You can say, no, I must have $5,000 more or else I don't take it. Like that's a bluff. Because the reality is if you don't have a second job lined up and maybe you're not working now or something, like whatever the situation is, you really have no choice. The only practical option is that you've got to take whatever offer they give you, right? So that's fine. You can accept the original offer. From what I understand of your situation, it's not a problem at all. It's just that you can't negotiate them, negotiate a better offer, right? Ben Noble, this is a big career change. The first web development job is hard to get, so I would take this either way. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. And that's the thing. Like some jobs are like that. If somebody gives you a chance, right? You're doing a career shift or some other kind of thing that's a bit of a jump. You might not be making more money, and that's fine because they're giving you something else. You're getting a reward out of it that's non-monetary. Right? Like maybe, think of an extreme case, like an internship. You take an internship, you have to work for a company, they don't really pay you, right? But you're doing it because you're still getting compensation. It's just that the compensation is not in the form of cash. The compensation might be in the form of a letter of recommendation or a reference, or the networking, because now you're on the inside of this company in this industry, and that has some privileges. It opens some doors for you. The obvious one is that, you complete the work necessary to get your educational qualification, right? So you're getting things out of it. It's just that they're non-monetary, right? So if you're already getting things out of this job, yeah, it's certainly worth maybe giving up 2K of your compensation package, which you would have liked, but there are other non-financial rewards. I have to wrap this up in about 10 minutes. So let's do the last few ones here. Mihal, if I'm saying that right, Mihal, Jadev. How can I ask my HR manager to increase my salary? Well, you could ask them, could you please increase my salary? Now, the default, like I've said earlier, the default answer is going to be no, because everybody wants more money and everybody asks for more money. And they are not going to give you more money just because you ask. The only time they're going to give you more money is if they're going to feel pain because of it, right? Meaning like, first of all, you leave. If they don't give you more money, you leave. Okay. I'm out of here. Hire somebody else. That's disruptive to them. It's painful. They've got to now find a new employee. They got to train them. That's painful. And it can be avoided if they just give you a little bit more money, right? However, if you just threaten to leave, it's a bluff, right? You have to be willing for them to call your bluff. Because if that worked, then everybody would be giving the company an ultimatum saying, you better pay me more money or I'm leaving, right? And the company would be, oh, okay, well, here you go, right? And we know they're not doing that, right? Usually the way these things work is that your bluff will be called. And I've seen that many times where an employee gives their notice. I just want you to know officially I'm leaving this job. My last day will be here, right? They say, okay, well, thank you for your service. It was nice working with you. We're going to throw you a bit of a going away party, right? Because you really are leaving. And the employee says yes. And then the employee's last day comes. They have cake. They shake the boss's hand. Goodbye. And then the very next day, the boss calls them at home and says, hey, look, come back. Let's talk. You need a little bit more money? Here you go. Come back. And next thing you know, they're back. Right? But it had to get to that stage before the company or the boss sees that, okay, they're serious. It's not a bluff. You know, and I don't want to go through the pain of having to replace them. So come on back. It's easier for me to give you an extra 5,000 or whatever than it is for me to pay a recruiter, either internally or externally, to post a job. I've got to write a job description. I've got to sit in rounds and rounds of job interviews. I got to read resumes. I don't want to do any of that. And then we have this learning curve with a new employee. They could work out. They might not work out. If they do work out, it'll still be 3 months before they're really productive and pulling their weight. You know, I don't want to. It's easier for me to just pay you another $5,000 a year. You know, that's what's going on the other side, right? But you would never get that until they call your bluff. Most of the time, there's always exceptions, but most of the time, they're not just going to give you more money because you ask. They have to be forced into giving you more money. And the other thing is that your boss, they don't always have the ability to just pay people more. They have to go, like, depending on the company and the size of the company and how it's set up, they might have to go to their boss and say, look, you need to increase my budget. Okay, this is not enough to keep these talented employees here and productive. Okay, they're leaving. They're leaving on me. I can't get them to stay. You know, I mean, how am I supposed to accomplish my goals if my human resources are not there? You know, I need more money so I can pay my employees. I can retain them. I can hire the right people and I can retain them. That's what I need, right? And once again, you get the same problem. The big boss says, well, you know, I'm not just going to give you more money because you ask me for it. Every department thinks, you know, they need more, they should have more money, right? So same thing, right? Anyway, you're absolutely welcome, Vintage Treasure 77. Thank you. I had to rephrase 4 times to get my question through. Very strange. I'm not using foul language, so something strange with your filters or moderators. Okay, yeah, I don't fully understand. I'm not a YouTube whiz. There's certain words, like, you know, obviously the obviously offensive words are filtered out, but I don't know what else is in there too. But you got through, so it's working, whatever you did. Just another couple of questions. Wasim McCad, do you think we should still apply for a complete remote job outside the US, even if the job ad says must be able to work in the US? Well, you can apply. I mean, there's no harm in applying. I imagine it's the same like most things. In some cases, they mean what they say, so it doesn't work out anyway. But in other cases, maybe it is inaccurate. Maybe they say that, but really, it's okay if you're outside the US. Whatever. It doesn't hurt to apply, and there's nothing preventing you from applying. So if it's something you really want to do, sure, apply for it. But don't just apply, try and apply for different companies, different situations, just to spread out. Maybe in one industry they mean what they say, but in another industry, it's a bit more flexible. Pavel, how important is English level? For what? You need to be more specific. Jason, how do we sell ourselves to remote work opportunities in the US when we don't reside there? I mean, I'm not a big expert on that. I'm not in the US, so I don't know. I don't know specifically about US requirements for that kind of stuff. I'm in Canada, so I mean, my knowledge of what the US needs for certain things is not the best. I mean, I know for some things that it's not a problem, like they hire, like I know India specifically, in a lot of countries, they intentionally go there for certain things, so I mean, it depends on the context, obviously. Anyway, listen, it's been a couple hours. I want to thank everyone for being here. I have to start winding this up now. There's 38 or 35 of you guys here, so thank you very much. Hopefully, you got some value out of this. This Friday night, which is early Saturday morning for me, and it's Saturday morning for people in Europe, and I think a little bit later for people in Asia. I have another live stream. It's a different live stream. It's not this one. It's not a Q&A live stream. It's called Beyond Employment, and it's just for people who are interested in making a living, but not as an employee. Okay, they want to break out of the sort of corporate slavery type existence. They want to have their own revenue streams, their own income source. They might want to start a company, have their own business venture, something like that. That's where we explore that stuff. Okay. It's an area that I really enjoy talking about. I know a lot. I actually know more about that area than I do about hiring. So I don't really get too much of an opportunity to speak about it on YouTube. So I've started this live stream. People wanted me to do it. I sort of put out some feelers based on some requests I received, and everybody wanted me to do it. So I did it. I'm doing 5 episodes. This will be the second episode coming up this Friday night in 2 days. And if people want me to continue, I'll continue. But this is going to be episode 2. And if you're interested in that, come and check that out. In the meantime, if you are trying to navigate the world of getting employment, passing job interviews, writing resumes, discovering job opportunities in the first place, understanding the different methods there are to get a job, right? You could apply through recruiters to posted ads, or you could do networking, and there's other things there too. If you're in the physical world, you're not doing this remotely, there's a lot of other options too. But if you're wanting the sort of full packaged course of like all these methods from beginning to end, everything you need to know, everything you need to do in one place, I have the course, the Get Hired course. A lot of people have taken it. I've got a lot of positive feedback on it. And just what it says right there, a step-by-step guide to discover job opportunities. That's the first thing. A lot of people don't know how to discover the jobs that are actually available to you. Then, to put yourself forward for it. So, to pass interviews and get hired using several methods. So, that's all in a course. Check that out. There's a link in the description if you're interested. I also have put a link to a video where I talk about the course specifically, so you know exactly what to expect, exactly what you're getting for your money. Okay, So if that's any interest to you, check it out. Alternatively, like it says on the screen, I've got a course called the $100 MBA. This is for people that are interested in learning business. Okay? Anything that deals with money is business. Okay? And I talked about this is what I talk about on my Friday live streams. Like if you do something artistic, you do art, or you're a musician and you play a musical instrument, okay? That's an artistic venture. But the moment you try and make money with it, now that money is in the equation, you're in the world of business. Welcome to the wonderful world of business. Okay? So if that's what you're interested in, learning business, how to make money, how to take the skills I have and to make money with them. Maybe you want a side hustle. Maybe you want to start your own business, whatever. Okay? But essentially, the gold standard of education in understanding business is getting an MBA, the Masters of Business Administration. Normally, if you go to a university to get an accredited MBA, it costs you 5 figures in US dollars. It takes 1 to 2 years of pretty intense work, okay? What I've done, because I have an MBA and because I've been the CEO of a company and I've been an executive manager for many years, is I've taken all of that and I've put it into a course. I call it a course, but it's really a program, okay, that's basically taking you through everything that you would do in a university MBA, okay, but in a $100 package, okay? Now, what's the catch? There is a catch. The catch is that it's not accredited, okay? The reason it's not accredited and never will be accredited is because there are no evaluations, no tests, no exams, no assignments. I have no way of knowing if you've learned anything from it. But frankly, I don't care. You could go as deep as you want. If you just want to put your toe in the water and skim the very basics of marketing and accounting and HR and finance and economics and innovation and like all the different stuff they have there. If you just want to sort of put your toe in the water and just skim everything, you can do that. That's cool. You can do it entirely on your own schedule at your convenience. If that's of any use to you, for some people it won't be, but if that's of particular interest to you, depending on your goals, check out that course. There's a link in the description. And I also put a link to a video where I talk in detail about the actual course. So you know what you're getting into, you know how it works before you commit to anything. Okay, so if that's of any interest to you, for some people, these things won't apply. For other people, it will be perfect for you. Check them out, link in description. This live stream will be up for, I don't know, about 12 hours on this channel. And then I take it with all my other live streams and I put them on my second channel. And that's, here's my finger here. Let's see if I can do this properly. My screen is back. This thing right here, The Company's Expert 2. So if you aren't subscribed to that, go and subscribe to The Company's Expert 2. I think I'm nearly at like 4,000 subscribers or something like that. So another few and I'll get there. So you never know. You could be the one. The 4,000th subscriber. And if this was, in the physical world, I would give you a handshake if that's happening. If you cross the bridge at the right time, you get a handshake. And who wouldn't want that? So check that out. And other than that, I will be back for another live stream on Saturday, early Saturday morning, my time, to talk about business and stuff like that. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. I'm here every Wednesday to do a general Q&A with everybody about hiring and job interviews and stuff like that. Thanks to everyone who asked questions. You guys are awesome. Hope to see you again. Best of luck. I will read the last couple of things that have just come in as I've been talking, and then we're done. Ziggy Stardust, thank you for an interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to your next discussion on Friday. Great. It would be wonderful to have you there, Ziggy. That's great. Maine Kuhn, I am from Germany and want to apply for a job in Canada. Do companies help to get authorization to work there? Once again, immigration and work visas are not really my core competency. So the best thing to do would be to check out, at the highest level, check out the website for the Canadian Embassy. Okay, they will be able to direct you from there. and get you answers to your questions. John Gabby, smash the thumbs up button now. Yes, good advice. Thank you very much. To Ragdoll, depends on the company, the role. Yeah, it's great when you guys talk to each other also. That's great, bringing us together. Diego Rodriguez, I'm in my job now, doing stuff while I'm listening in. I might have some more questions, but none come to mind right now. Some other time, I guess. What you do is great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Diego. That it's comments like that that make my day. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to help. Wow. JMJMAMG says, hello, Bill. I'm super interested in your $100 MBA. For me, this is going to boost my knowledge and skill set. Thank you for being my mentor. Not a problem, JMJMAMG. How do you say that? I guess I could call you Jim, right? It kind of rolls off the tongue, you know? LOL. Yes, check it out. And if it meets a need for some people. I created it for people to learn business, right? It's not going to impress anyone if you're trying to impress anyone with a piece of paper and say, I have this qualification, right? But if you just want to learn the actual material so that you can make better decisions in your life and possibly even generate some revenue streams for yourself outside of just being an employee, that was the goal in mind. So check it out. If it works for you, great. If not, no pressure. But yeah, I hope it goes well. And thank you for saying so. Alice, thank you. Looking forward to discussion on Friday. Yes, Alice. And I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks, everyone. You guys are awesome. See you Friday. Have a great week. Over and out. Take care.